Xi visited Russia, he mentioned that taking back Taiwan is the historical imperative. China always think time is on my side. Because Taiwan is so small, once Chinese economy grows, they will start to join us. But in recent years, they realized that identity actually matters. Handling of protests in Hong Kong really pour more cold water to the kind of people in Taiwan. I think from rationalist perspective, there's no point to take over Taiwan militarily. I think this motivation is really driven by this nationalism, patriotism, and domestic consumption.
Today, I'm again joined by Professor Fubing Su to discuss Taiwan.
Yeah, thanks for getting me back.
Taiwan could wait for 100 years was the quote by Mao Zedong during his conversation with Nixon. But seems like things are heating up.
I think there are very strong domestic forces that's driving Chinese aggressive kind of a posture over Taiwan. A lot of Chinese foreign policies can be understood by the CCP and also Xi's kind of legitimacy, kind of concerns. For a long time, since 1970s, Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy is very much based on performance. They claim that only Communist Party is able to deliver economic growth and improving people's kind of living standards. So this is almost like in competition with other East Asian kind of countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, all have delivered higher living standards to its population. The CCP can say, don't worry, we can do the same thing. Really, provided a certain kind of legitimacy to the Communist Party, I would say in these 1990s, early 2000s. But particularly after 2008 financial crisis, this source of economic kind of performance is declining. So that's why you see that Communist Party has basically shifted this kind of rhetorics, narratives, more kind of nationalist kind of rhetorics. So it's no longer we can improve people's living standard, that the Communist Party is able to restore the nation's glory. We can wash away all the humiliations done by foreign powers in the modern era. So this kind of rhetoric is really, I think, put more urgency. And it's also true particularly on the Xi, he's really using the populist kind of rhetorics to shore up his kind of legitimacy. I think many of your viewers probably know that when she took over, he launched two major campaigns, populist campaigns. One is anti-corruption. He basically showed, past leaders were not very caring people's kind of livelihood. So I am going to arrest corrupt officials and make sure that the government is responsive to the people. And of course, many people study that it's not really arrest the corrupt officials, but arrest his political rivals, so he can secure his kind of control. So the second populist policy is anti-poverty. So he launched a massive campaign to eradicate poverty across the country. Of course, it's all very kind of bureaucratic kind of policies, just force government officials to pair up with a poverty household to just relieve poverty, but it's not sustained. And so that's the two kind of very populist policy. And of course, not surprisingly, the other populist policies to look for enemy and say, oh, see, we lost the Taiwan, or previous Chinese government, like Qing government dynasties or Republic of China lost the Taiwan. So we will reclaim Taiwan. So that kind of, I would say, is very much kind of legitimacy motivated kind of foreign policy making in this particular case. And this has become more urgent when Chinese economy facing more headwinds in this kind of Trump era. So that's why I think structurally it's not a very good time for Taiwan.
Before we dive into what's happening with Taiwan right now, I think it would be very useful to explore its history and how it came to be. So Taiwan is viewed by China as pretty much a state at a stage of an active rebellion. And it is part of China, which I think is a fair assumption in many ways, looking at its history. So the mainland China is officially called People's Republic of China. Taiwan is Republic of China. And I was hoping you could shed some light into the rebellious time when the Chinese empire fell and how KMT and the Communist Party sort of had their fighting happen and how it pretty much resulted in the creation of Taiwan.
Yeah, I think this is a fabulous question because when you hear the rhetoric, Chinese Communist Party always say, oh, Taiwan has always been part of China. It's always been part of this motherland. China is always this motherland of Taiwan. In fact, it's a myth. And if you look carefully, before 17th century, China was not even there, right? Taiwan is basically isolated kind of island, no economic value to the rest of the world or to China. Chinese empire was very much kind of continental land-based empire. In fact, for a long time, they even actively banned seafaring activities like ocean kind of routes because they typically view them as kind of agricultural civilization based on mainland. The first time China really had some relationship with Taiwan was it's mostly just like a fisherman, travel across the strait and then landed there. But there's no effective kind of Chinese presence governance until the mid 17th century. Dutch East India Company actually started to settle in Taiwan. Of course, we know that indigenous people lived there. But it was known to the rest of the world, to global kind of history through the Dutch East India Company, and they administrated trade through these kind of posts there. Then later on, one rebel group, I would say not rebel, but it's a remnant of a Ming dynasty because Ming at the time was invaded by Manchu. Manchu established the Qing Empire and ousted the Ming. Ming dynasty was very much a Han Chinese based empire. So this group really resisted this any kind of foreign control. So they fled mainland China and
Was
settled.
that in times where there were like a bunch of sort of rebel military governments in China?
Yeah. The called Zheng Chenggong. He was loyal to Ming Dynasty, and he said, "I will never serve the barbarian Manchu." That's why he fled mainland and settled in Taiwan. Used Taiwan as a base to stage some kind of rebellion against Qing Dynasty. Interestingly, similar like today, right? And of course, later on, Qing dynasty conquered Zheng and Taiwan. So Taiwan was for the first time was under Chinese control, like a political administrative control. And of course, after 1895, China lost the war with Japan, and Japan took over Taiwan. So Taiwan was a colony for under Japan for 50 years. That was a very crucial moment for understanding today's Taiwan because under Japanese management, Taiwan started to modernize very quickly because that's why many people still remember fondly of Japanese colonialism. And interestingly, the first president popularly elected in Taiwan, Li Denghui, was actually part of that kind of older generation. His family were part of this Taiwanese elites. So that's why many people in Taiwan even hated him for being Japanese, basically Japanese kind of collaborators. And so after 1945, when Japan was defeated, Taiwan was returned to China, but only to Republic of China. And the People's Republic of China was, of course, not even established then. So that's why when KMT or Republic of China was defeated, they moved to Taiwan and settled in Taiwan and claimed that this is a Republic of China in Taiwan, and their aim is to reunite with China in the future, of course, by taking over.
And just to back off there a little bit, so we had pretty much imperial China, then it was sort of failing to modernize with the times. So it was very much losing to the West. England started taking parts of China. There were established a lot of militant local governments. Basically, change was very much needed. And then we had sort of the educated elite, which was KMT, that were sort of fighting to do something similar to what Japan was doing and make sure that China goes with the times and becomes semi-westernized. And then we had the Communist Party, who started beating them in this rebellion. And then KMT, that's kind of their origin, and they retreated to Taiwan.
Yeah, so that's the domestic side of the story. So it's the Communist Party basically fought with the Nationalist Party, the KMT party, because they had very different kind of visions. And of course, they had the common origin in terms of the party organization. They were all supported by the Soviet Union. But the later on, the Nationalist Party was supported by more like United States and Britain. So this kind of alignment starts to divide China. China was basically divided into these two different camps, and for many, many different reasons that CCP defeated KMT. It's a combination of some mistakes, some kind of the historical accidents, like Japanese invasion, and also the mismanagement of the economy. Chiang Kai-shek and KMT really, really lost the war and also lost the economy and lost the popular support. And so that's why they retreated to Taiwan. But Chiang Kai-shek always claimed that Taiwan is only a province of the large China, and sooner or later, the Republic of China will retake the mainland, and of course, with the support from United States and the West. And he didn't foresee that all the changes afterwards. And in fact, in his later life, he had no hope that Taiwan would be able to retake the mainland China. So that became the challenge for the Taiwanese elites. How do you actually reorient your kind of regime so you will become a local regime? Impossible for you to reclaim whole China. But then for a long time, particularly KMT, soured its relationship with local Taiwanese elites. There's so-called the February 28th massacre. That's when Nationalist Party took over Taiwan. The first thing they did was that try to cleanse the Taiwanese kind of elites, because for them, these elites were basically puppets of the Japanese colonizers, and they had deep affection for the colonialism, and so have no kind of loyalty to the Chinese nation. So a lot of policies was from hindsight, it's very unstrategic, right? It's basically targeted local people, local elites, arrested them, throw them into prison, also killed a lot of people. And then people protest and then further sour the relationship.
What years were those events?
I believe it's 1945 or 46. So when that the Republic of China or KMT start to move into Taiwan. So there's a lot of local resistance to this.
Interesting. In a way, this KMT took over Taiwan, established their society, and now there is another threat of China retaking over Taiwan after China already took over Taiwan.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the current status of Taiwan as a country? Because it's quite strange.
I think it's by international law, I think it's like a territories, just territories in the global system. And of course, in Taiwan, they claim that it's not like just a territory. We have a national government and the Republic of China. And for a long time, of course, Republic of China control all territories like mainland and Taiwan. But recently they changed this kind of claim, and it's Republic of China, mostly based in Taiwan. So it's of course there's an attempt to change the name to Republic of Taiwan, but that kind of name change is quite sensitive because to China that indicates that Taiwan is willing to go independent. You are no longer accept this one China policy. That's for a long time is kind of a consensus or baseline at least from Chinese side. 1992, like after all this kind of collapse of the Cold War, there's a major shift there. So KMT also start to say, we're not aiming to take over China, right? So, but we want to live peacefully with you. And so the China side said, let's then figure out how to plan for the future. So the KMT at that time was still the ruling party. So KMT and the Chinese Communist Party met, and they agree that we will peacefully coexist, but we all acknowledge that there's one China. Only one China can represent both mainland and Taiwan. But we, for now, we will accept this kind of status quo. The status quo is the de facto independence of Taiwan from the mainland or People's Republic of China kind of administration. And even in the future, maybe we can talk about the so-called one country, two systems. People all know that, oh, this is about applied to Hong Kong. But actually, this notion was initially proposed to solve the Taiwan issue, because they're saying we would just have this kind of almost like a confederacy. We have a common name, all China, but Taiwan can have your own government, your own military, your kind of financial system, your even passport. So it's only in name. So that was the kind of idea in the 1990s. But once Taiwan started to have real popular election, 1996, there's a gradual shift in Taiwanese society. More and more people believe that they're Taiwanese, they are not Chinese. Of course, a lot of this, again, history comes back to haunt KMT and also Communist parties, that the Taiwanese elite who grew up during the Japanese colonies always had this kind of more independent kind of identity from a KMT or CCP. And the February 28th massacre also further soured the relation between Taiwanese elite and the KMT. So that's when Taiwan started to have democratic elections. The more local Taiwanese people start say, we want to form our own parties and we have different kind of visions for this land. So-called Formosa, right? We are not Taiwan, we are Formosa. So their ultimate goal is to have independent kind of country and the Republic of Taiwan. And 2000, this Democratic Progressive Party won presidential election. So under DPP party, Taiwan launched a systematic kind of, I would say, educational reform. The goal is to instill some kind of local identities. So in their kind of textbooks, it's no longer, Taiwan history is part of Chinese history. They shifted this to world history, and more content were added to talk about the Taiwanese, indigenous politics, all those things. The idea is to educate young people that Taiwan is different from China, and we are not part of China historically. Again, so this kind of colonialism was added. It's like Chinese presence here was like a colonial control of Taiwanese history. And since then, of course, 2008 was a KMT kind of control. But then the 2016 went back to DPP, Democratic Progressive Party. And the last year, again, Democratic Progressive Party won election again. So I wouldn't say that the general public become less and less accepting this notion that Taiwan is part of China. We are part of Chinese history. So that, I think, is another factor really contributed to the kind of escalation of this kind of Chinese aggression. Because from Xi's perspective, for a long time, like 1990s, China always think time is on my side. Because Taiwan is so small, once Chinese economy grows, they will start to join us because they love to be part of a large economy and make a lot of money. But in recent years, they realize that identity actually matters. Once people change how they think about themselves, then no matter how much money, economic benefit you give them, people actually reject your kind of benefits. So that's why she says it's probably time for us to take Taiwan back. Otherwise, we will lose Taiwan forever.
And my understanding is that people in Taiwan generally would love to declare themselves as just like independent Taiwan at this point. However, if they were to move in that direction and actually proceed with those changes, that would be kind of almost like a territorial threat to CCP, because now these people are trying to take away part of China and move away from this one China policy. I remember it was quite a big scandal when Trump first became president. He wanted to give a call to Xi, I think, or to China, and he accidentally called Taiwan, and that was a big scandal.
Yeah, I won't be surprised. His team, particularly his first-term team, was quite chaotic. So I think based on recent like a public opinion survey, about at least 2/3 of Taiwanese kind of public call themselves Taiwanese, singular, because identity is an interesting kind of thing. Remember, even Taiwanese are actually Han Chinese. Their ancestors came to Taiwan like in the 17th, 18th century. So most people came from Fujian people and also from Canton. So those are like people who migrated to Taiwan, settle there, and start to develop their kind of businesses, other things. So, but even so, in terms of ethnicity, about 80% of people in Taiwan are Han Chinese. But the Han Chinese are divided into two groups. One is so-called Chinese or mainlanders. The other group is called the so-called Taiwanese. And this kind of identity is very much based on like who your ancestors are. Like if your ancestors come from like a mainland, like several hundred years ago, you're like Taiwanese. But in more recent years, this kind of identity is getting more like what kind of belief you have. Do you believe that we're part of China, or do you believe in democracy, freedom, all those things, right? So that's why more and more people, like according to one survey, 2/3 people call themselves Taiwanese.
I have actually like exact numbers from research centers. In terms of the total population, 67% believe they're primarily Taiwanese. 28% believe that they're both Taiwanese and Chinese, and only 3% that they believe that they're primarily Chinese. And interestingly, in the age group from 18 to 34, we have 83% think that they're primarily Taiwanese, then 15% think both, and then only 1% thinks of themselves as primarily Chinese.
Yeah. Remember, in early 1990s, the number would be, I would say, a third and a third. So a third people believe they are like Taiwanese. A third believe they are primarily Chinese. A third believe they are like both Chinese and Taiwanese. So clearly you can see this kind of a trend. Democratization has created this kind of momentum for localization. More and more people start to identify with democracy, freedom, hate this kind of communism, totalitarianism, and they reject that kind of notion that we can be ruled by such a party. So in that sense, I feel the Communist Party and Xi are like feel the urgency, right? They know that they are losing the heart. Even that like 20-80% of people, I think a lot of them may be really think this more pragmatically. They're saying probably if I'm claim I'm Taiwanese, then this may provoke, or they may encourage because Taiwan is also politically divided into the KMT and the DPP. A lot of people in KMT are hardcore, those pro-China kind of forces. This actually create a very complicated situation for Taiwanese politics. Sometimes, I think China is actually trying to exploit this kind of division, in Taiwan. So almost like use them as a kind of a Trojan horse, and the actively sabotage the Taiwanese kind of defense. That further triggers this kind of almost like a antagonism between DPP and the KMT. Interestingly, I believe just last week, not a while ago, it's a Taiwanese kind of executive UN issued something about ethnic identification in Taiwan, and they deliberately removed Han Chinese in their kind of ethnic classification.
How can you do that if it's like the majority of the population?
Yeah. So that's why I say, like 2% of people are indigenous people, and the rest come from other places. But people checked in the past, they always, 90% of people are Han Chinese and 2.6% are like indigenous people, right? So clearly they are downplaying this kind of a unity. And from this ethnic kind of perspective, I think they're intentionally saying that what kind of blood running in your body doesn't matter. what's in your brain matters. Like, do you accept this notion, democracy, freedom, or you accept this kind of a one China under a communist party, right? So that actually immediately it became an issue in Taiwan, and the KMT, particularly this hardcore pro-China, people start to say, "Oh, see, you guys are politicize a lot of things just to divide up society." This if Taiwan cannot put up with very solid, unified kind of front, it will be very challenging.
I remember in one of your classes, you showed us videos of people coming from mainland China into Taiwan as tourists, or maybe they were immigrating there, and there were clashes even in like small local shops on the streets. What are the relationships between the local Taiwan population and sort of mainland newcomers?
Newcomers, you mean visitors?
Visitors or immigrants, if there are such.
Yeah. That's an interesting point because on Chinese social media in the past few months, one big kind of incident is there are a number of Chinese women who married to Taiwanese men. So it's called the Lu Pei. Basically, it's like a spouse from mainland China. And quite a few of them are like social media influencers. And so they are very popular in mainland China. And what they did every day is just shoot some messages, and they would say, "Oh, it's terrible. Taiwan is a terrible place. They are discriminating against us." And in fact, in several pieces, they actually call mainland China should actually send the military in and just wipe out those kind of horrible people in Taiwan, right? So it's caused a lot of course, it's very popular in mainland China, and people view them, oh, it's very patriotic people, and they are taking over Taiwan. And in Taiwan, you can imagine it's very, I would say, at least it's polarizing. The pro-China faction probably tolerate this group of people, but many people just got really, really angry. How can we actually host these people? Apparently, they are not patriotic to this nation, to this country, and of course, again, what country that fundamental gets to. If you say, oh, we are all part of China, then it's not that provocative. But if you believe that Taiwan is a country of democracy, freedom, we have our own unique history past, then this will become very, very antagonistic. So that's why under public pressure, I believe the spouse were kicked out of Taiwan, and they were basically sent back to China.
Wow. So in terms of what people think in the mainland China, they're very much like super majority supportive over reunification.
Of course, I cannot trust any Chinese survey data on this. If you ask people, 98% people say yes. But I think, again, we can use one kind of this incident as a measure. It's probably true on social media. A lot of people praised these three kind of spouses. They praise them for standing up for this one China policy. And in fact, you pay the price for this. You are true patriotic. But I also saw a lot of social media are very sarcastic about them because, of course, it's very hard for Chinese social media people to actually say Taiwan should be independent. You guys are really bad people. How dare you do this and that, right? But I do see a lot of people make very implicit criticism of this spouse. They would say, "Oh, see, they are making a lot of patriotic comments, claims, and say many bad things about Taiwan. But look at how they do. Actually, spoke louder than their kind of speech. Because first, when Taiwan want to kick them out, they scream cried everywhere. If you truly patriotic to China, you should proudly leave Taiwan, right? But look again." When they were kicked out, they actually didn't bring along their kind of children with them. In fact, they chose to keep their children in Taiwan, right?
So again, horrible Taiwan.
Yeah, so you just leave your kind of kids in this really, really bad place and let and don't return to our motherland, right? It says, if you love our motherland so much, why don't you actually do what you claim? And so that's why I think I wouldn't say that all Chinese are supportive of retaking Taiwan. And many people are also realistic and reasonable. They know the costs. The costs will be borne by, first, people will have to serve in the army. Usually people don't have resources and people coming from less well-to-do families. Two is that hurting Taiwan and China relations will hurt Chinese economy, particularly along the East Coast, like Fujian and Shanghai, Zhejiang and Guangdong have a lot of investments from Taiwan. And doing so will only hurt their kind of livelihood. So I think those people are not allowed to speak up. So that's why I want to basically caution this kind of a united one voice coming from China. People may be surprised. Once China launch a war, there may be domestic kind of consequences. Maybe some people say, no, I'm not going to support this, or there may be even support for like sabotage Chinese efforts.
I want to explore more of what the repercussions could be of that possible military action on behalf of China. Before we go into that, I wanted to explore the notion of this Chinese humiliation, sort of the origin of it, and especially how it works in terms of Taiwan, because Taiwan, in a way, is a more successful state in terms of providing economic, better life for its people.
Yeah, humiliation. Of course, we know the humiliation mostly is drawn from the kind of tragic encounter with the West in the 19th century when China was basically militarily defeated by Britain first and then later on all the Western powers, right? So that's the kind of sources of rhetoric of the century of humiliation. So that has become a key kind of element of Chinese kind of propaganda and also part of the legitimacy. So Communist Party will always claim that we are able to rebuild China, reclaim our kind of past glory under our kind of modernization. So that's why that's very, very important kind of rhetoric. But about Taiwan is that Taiwan is an interesting kind of case because under KMT, Taiwan was able to develop very fast, right? It's one of the four little tiger economies, and particularly in the export and also in high-tech kind of sector. So it's 1990s, Taiwan was actually inspiration and also a source of technology and a market for Chinese kind of development. So that's, I don't think Taiwan will play into Chinese kind of modernization through the humiliation. But only afterwards, Chinese economies start to grow, develop, then they start to view Taiwan from more like a historical perspective, right? It's no longer, for a while, like 1980s, 90s, many Chinese are proud of Taiwan, right? Taiwan was able to achieve such fast economic growth, particularly break into the technologies that are dominated by the West, right? It's a very source of pride. But it's only again, one economic growth starts to slow down and China trying to rediscover this kind of humiliation. And of course, this is not just about Taiwan. In fact, all the Xinjiang, Tibet, all those kind of ethnic minority regions, once you use this kind of rhetoric and all these areas will become like a kind of a securitized. So it's no longer like the rhetoric becomes, oh, how can we let like Taiwan go? If so, we'll have to lose Xinjiang, we will lose Tibet. And this is not acceptable, right? Our nation has been humiliated by the West and our territory has been taken away. So we just cannot repeat that kind of past. And interestingly, again, like last week, Xi visited Russia, the celebration of the end of World War II, right? In his speech, he mentioned that taking back Taiwan is the historical imperative. But it's ironic. Remember, the country take most territory from China is actually Russia, right? So India. So again, you can see that this kind of historical narrative is very selective. And I also saw some social media kind of influencer sometimes will mention, oh, actually, look, the like Northeast, China, a lot of territory is taken away by Russia. Maybe it's our time, like use the opportunity when Russians tied down in Ukraine, we should also take over some territories. So it's a very delicate kind of a game to play, right? If you drum up nationalism, yes, you may direct this kind of force toward certain areas, like Taiwan, can drum up support for that. But it can also tie the hands of Chinese kind of policymakers. How do you deal with Xinjiang? How do you deal with Tibet? And how do you deal with a lot of territories lost to I don't think it's an easy game to play. It's sometimes can go back really.
Do you think after Taiwan, what are the main Chinese territorial claims that they currently do not control?
I think this moment, still probably going, some dispute is really with India. Some territory in southern part of southwest corner of China, and also even Kashmir is part of this kind of dispute kind of territory there. But I don't think even though China lost a lot of territory to Russia, I don't think China will be, or at least Russia is not willing to engage in any kind of negotiation with China. So I think the next real territorial frontier would be something with India, and of course some island, like in South China Sea, and in East China Sea would be the island dispute with Japan. But I feel that all those are manageable. I would say I won't think those are triggers for some kind of international conflict. I would view them as kind of excuses for a bad relationship. If the bilateral relationship deteriorates, then those kind of sore kind of spots will flare up. But by themselves, I don't think anyone care that much about some rocks in the middle of nowhere, or some kind of land that probably not even inhabitable.
I think one of the biggest sources of defense for Taiwan is their chip industry, and China's dependent on it. The entire world is dependent on it. I think now there are manufacturing of chips all around the world, but still the most advanced ones are still currently in Taiwan. There's a movement to move that to the United States. I think it's happening quite successfully, but still hasn't been completed. How real and absolute, I guess, that shield is, you believe? How does China think about that?
Of course, I believe 90% of the advanced chips are still made in Taiwan. Probably it will change a little bit the next 2 or 3 years. But still, I think it will be in Taiwan's interest to resist any kind of moving out of Taiwan, because that's probably the best assets Taiwan has. And so this will, in a way, this will deter Chinese invasion, because it's like technology is not like a piece of territory, right? You can invade and occupy it. If you don't have the brain, you still cannot produce it. So that's why this will provide some deterrence against kind of Chinese invasion. And of course, for the United States, I think, again, this is something Trump is trying to push Taiwan to move factories to the United States. It makes some sense to secure American kind of supply chain, right? Because American products also, particularly military, also heavily dependent on this advanced chips. But it's also true that if you move too much away from Taiwan, then this will weaken American commitment to Taiwan. So that's, I think, it's really U.S. needed to think more carefully. Maybe move another 30% or 40% of production capacity to U.S. or diversified it to Japan or South Korea. Would it be a reasonable kind of move? Moving away all production is not wise from long-term perspective. So of course, that's from economic perspective. There's also military kind of value of Taiwan for the United States, right? So that's maybe a separate issue we can.
What do you think is the military value?
Military value, again, I would say, for most people, who cares about occupying Taiwan? What can you do? Do you send people over there? And that's not really important. That's why I think any kind of this kind of dispute oftentimes is a result of large kind of relations. The Taiwan, I think, becoming more important is that if China and the U.S. kind of bilateral relationship deteriorates, and then the Taiwan can become very important military assets. Geopolitically, it's only 100 miles away from mainland. So that's can be a very, very effective kind of a position for United States. If Taiwan is under the protection of United States, you can deploy Africa carriers or fighter jets, missile bases, or even a radar reconnaissance kind of capacities. So because Taiwan is in the so-called the first island chain, Japan, Okinawa, Taiwan, Philippines, those chain. So this chain can be very, very important if there's a war between U.S. and China. Losing this means that the U.S. will have to push back to the second island chain. And this will give Chinese ships and Chinese missiles and also all kinds of aircraft a huge base. So they can use that staging point to actually threaten U.S. second island chain. So that's why I think this island will become more crucial if bilateral relationship deteriorates. Some kind of military confrontation is anticipated. And of course, this is separated from the U.S. involvement in Taiwanese independence. And so that's somewhat different because I feel that the escalation of Taiwan has basically a third kind of force, that is the U.S. kind of perspective about the rise of China. And if a lot of hardcore planners in the U.S. view that the confrontation with China is inevitable, then we need to prepare for this a military kind of planning. Then Taiwan will become part of this kind of a large plan.
Another thing I wanted to talk about is feasibility of taking over Taiwan, because in terms of its infeasibility, I hear a lot of things. So first of all, limited Chinese military experience in terms of taking over the island. It's really hard to take over Taiwan because there are all of these beaches that's very hard to land on. So it's very easy to defend against. So first of all, militarily, it's going to be difficult against Taiwan itself. Then there's strong reasons to believe, I think, United States hasn't fully said that it's going to militarily defend Taiwan, but we have very strong reasons to believe that they will. Japan might join because they really don't want Taiwan to go to China. Philippines, we don't know, but they also wouldn't want China to take over Taiwan. So we have all of those things. And then if the mission is successful, I've heard that they're in all of these chip factories, there are some, secret bombs that they're just going to explode all of these factories. People are going to be very disobedient. And then on top of it, we could expect all of the array of Western sanctions, and seeing kind of how the trade war is developing. That would be truly devastating for a Chinese economy. So looking at any one individual part of this whole potential plan, it just seems like, how would you possibly ever attempt something like this? What do you think? How do you think the CCP is thinking about all of those components?
Yeah, I agree. I think from rationalist perspective, there's no point for China to take over Taiwan militarily. I think even if you can take it over, it will be just rubbles. And because the true value of Taiwan is kind of a human capital, right? I can imagine once China attack Taiwan, the most valued this kind of human capital will leave Taiwan immediately, right? It's either United States or Taiwan will definitely protect that kind of assets. Then what's the point of reclaiming another kind of island, managing 20 million people? So that's why I think it's really, first, this motivation is really driven by this nationalism, patriotism, and domestic consumption. Having said that is that then I think more realistically, China is not trying to take over Taiwan militarily and by force. Their goal is to somehow force Taiwan to submit to Chinese rule without actually taking it over, right? So that's why a lot of people nowadays talking about so-called gray zone tactics. So I'm not actually military, invade you, capitulate your kind of government or military command. I'm just going to tie to the news to the point that people will revolt, and then they will say, we will welcome the kind of Chinese presence here. So that way, the economy will still be there, and hopefully the kind of high-tech industry will still be there.
Well, how is that going?
I remember, a few months ago, there's a Chinese conducted a lot of military exercises, constantly conduct a military exercise. And so once in a while, they say, We accidentally cut the kind of cable, so somehow disrupt the Taiwanese kind of economy. And or we will once in a while we will conduct like military exercise, and we will shoot missiles over certain kind of water. So please stay away from them. So this will disrupt the kind of Taiwanese economy, access to the rest of the world. So it costs enough kind of chaos or resentment from the kind of opposition forces in Taiwan. So this way will embolden the hands of the KMT, pro-China forces. And so the pro-independence forces will start to decline and lose their morale. And then at least the Taiwan will be able to maintain the status quo. Right. So I think that's probably the best thing China can do. I remember like RAND or a lot of US think tanks had run some kind of simulations, try to see whether or not militarily it's possible for China to take over. There are indications that China is indeed increasing its military capacity. So that actually causing more trouble for Taiwan and for US even. So so-called porcupine kind of strategy. But again, I want to go back to the fundamental issue. Why do you want to take it over? I think that's a bigger question. If Xi is really for his own political survival, or like they really need some kind of nationalist kind of boost, that may be. But again, it's a really irrational kind of a policy choice for China if they do choose to take a military kind of.
Well, I feel like they're sort of putting themselves into the corner in a way with rising all of these like rhetorics around we're going to do it. So now if you want to look like a strong, like come from a position of power, you kind of, in a couple of years, you're going to have to do it. If we look at the surveys with like out of young people, only 1% see themselves as primarily Chinese. And myself being Ukrainian, I could attest to the whole scaring somebody into submission strategy not being very effective. It seems like, I don't know, it seems like a losing strategy of what CCP is doing right now.
Yeah, definitely the current policy doesn't help. It's like you're winning the heart and mind of people, but all they did, all the kind of their handling of protests in Hong Kong really pour more cold water to the kind of people in Taiwan. So it's further alienate the kind of younger generation. So it's it almost sounds like some kind of military invasion is inevitable. I'm more optimistic. I think this is Xi is not not all that powerful and can achieve whatever he wants, right? One recent example, just look at his relationship with the military. Even Chinese military is not able to, first, in terms of capacity, they don't have the capacity to actually execute this. Second is that they don't even have the will to do this. We all know that China lost the defense ministers, right? 2 defense ministers in the past few years. And in fact, not a long time ago, another major military commission member was also arrested. Of course, we don't know why, but clearly these are people he actually chose. Remember, when he came to power in 2012, he actually arrested all military generals in really top echelon because he worried that those are the members of his political rivals. And then he put into place his trusted members. But his trusted members are not trustworthy again, right? Partly because many of those new generals are just not very competent. In any kind of this kind of autocratic state, you're choosing between competent people versus loyal people. But oftentimes these are incompatible, right? If you choose loyal people, usually those are people who are incompetent, but who are willing to stake their kind of fate with this kind of leader. So that's why, interestingly, even his trusted military generals are not able to gain further trust. And then he's replacing, I think, more loyal people, probably even less competent people, right, conducting military. And of course, it's also because those loyal people, once they gain trust, they engage a lot of corruption. because they have a lot of resources. So they just sell the kind of like military kind of offices, also get the money from awarding lucrative contract to their trusted kind of friends, right? It's like a Ukraine and Russian war. Like before the war, everybody thought Russia had such a predominant war kind of power. But once you started fighting, actually your military general actually didn't have equipment because they diverted money to something else. China had the same kind of concern. Just militarily, I don't think there's capability and also will to actually fight a hard war.
There is this anecdote that I've heard of two Russian and Chinese officials. So the Russian official goes to the Chinese official's villa, and it's on the river, and the Chinese official takes him to the balcony. He's like, "Do you see that bridge?" He's like, "I see it." And he's like, 10% of that bridge paid for this villa. And then the Russian official invites the Chinese official to his villa, and it's on the river. They go to the balcony, and the Russian official is like, "Do you see that bridge?" And the Chinese official is like, "No, I don't see it." He's like, "It paid for this villa."
Bridge. It's a serious issue, and this is particularly true if if you award like office to your trusted, loyal people. Right, the loyal people can oftentimes abuse their power, believing that they have the kind of patron on his side. So that's a serious issue, and of course we don't know what happened to the recent kind of reshuffling all these kind of high-ranking military generals in China. Some people even say some like so-called loyal generals are actually trying to resist this kind of policy. So it's almost like this political conspiracy involved. But I think most likely is that Xi was disappointed in his trusted, he promoted them, but these people just abused the power, embezzled the money, and in the end, his war plan was not able to be executed. So I think that's probably more like a reasonable kind of speculation of what's going on with Chinese military.
I wanted to ask you about kind of your optimism here, because to me, it seems like China's very much signaling we're going to invade Taiwan. What you mentioned, they said when they visited Russia, the trainings near the Taiwan island. Do you think is just attempts to threaten Taiwan? How do you kind of read their signals?
Maybe I'm naive. I think it's just make no sense for China to invade, other than there's some political crisis within the party that she must do something, even though that means that destroy lives for millions, destroy a vibrant economy. And of course, like they did that all the time, right? But I think it's still that there's this danger if you launch a war and the war was defeated, this may trigger domestic crisis, and then in fact he may be overthrown by his own people. Of course, I know the Putin's case. Many people also hoped for similar kind of development in Russia. Once military setback will trigger some kind of domestic resistance, Putin will be overthrown or even assassinated. So far, it looks like he was safe. So maybe she gained this more kind of confidence, so he can probably pull this off. But I still feel that cross the Taiwan Strait is more challenging than just cross the border from Russia entering Ukraine, and particularly if you have U.S. This kind of U.S. is already preparing and probably even waiting for such kind of a confrontation, and it will definitely more challenging than the Russian-Ukraine case. So I hope this will damp Xi's kind of ambition a little bit.
You think if she's unable to make any sort of progress within the goal of further reunification, do you think he'd be able to back out of that whole narrative and people would be okay with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about it, but because my view in general is that even though I said that the nationalism is playing with fire, once you let it go, then sometimes can run wild. But it's also true that if you look at the Chinese kind of media control, and particularly its machinery in the propaganda, it does have a lot of control. And for example, last few years, a lot of kind of social media coverage of women kind of incidents, like some iron chained lady, and also another kind of several women were beaten up in a restaurant. It created a massive kind of storm on social media, like people calling the government to do something. But it just after a while, after a few months, everything's cleaned up on the internet. And so people start almost feel nothing. So I don't want to underestimate the power of the Communist Party to again walk out of this kind of narrative. It's like sadly in today's world, people are easy to forget and forgive and move on. Particularly with social media, people have probably only have 2 minutes kind of memory.
Like a goldfish.
So once another kind of news cycle come in, and people start to say, "Oh, Taiwan is our treasure island, and it's this wonderful place." Again, I was thinking about Japan. A few years back, like Japan was the number one enemy for all Chinese. Everyone hate Japanese cars, Japanese products. People even wear Japanese kind of clothes will be attacked in public. I was thinking about 1980s. All Chinese are watching Japanese movies and listening to Japanese songs, and we all love Japanese. I think even last few years, you see the government actually strategically tone down anti-Japanese kind of rhetorics, and so the people seem to be fine with any kind of a government going back and forth. And I feel the same thing even in the United States. Once politicians fan some kind of a rhetoric, people follow. But 1 month later or 2 months later, people start to embrace totally opposite kind of positions. There will always be some hardcore, like anti-Japanese people, anti-American, or hardcore Taiwan kind of people. But I think majority people are people who just want to live a normal life. And if this policy will affect my life, like even like a tariff kind of war, right? Like before Trump launched tariff war, most people say, yes, let's do it. But after 2 months, people say, enough, don't do this anymore. You're destroying my life, right? So you can see the popular support for Trump, and then Trump start to adjust. Of course, he has less restraints than democratic elected leaders. But I still feel the economic kind of burden, trouble is becoming more and more heavier for Xi, and he has to make adjustments. And recent kind of negotiation or concessions made on the Chinese part probably reflect this.
Do you think Xi would be willing, if taking over Taiwan is necessary for him staying in power, he'd be willing to sacrifice the Chinese economy ultimately for sort of his position?
Again, I don't know a lot about the inside information. I don't have the intelligence, but my sense is that he will, even though there will be serious consequences, economic consequences, and even political consequences. Remember, if military invasion didn't go well, this may backfire, really backfire. The military generals may actually do something, right? So that can hurt his kind of power. Because even, of course, in the public, we don't know. Based on my belief that most potential powerful kind of rivals are already gone. He was able to actually silence them, either bottom them off or silence them through all different kind of mechanisms. I don't think there are people who can rally other elites, leaders, or the general public to actually put pressure on Xi. So that's not a lot of restraints on Xi's power. So that's why, even though I think it's not likely. I'm still optimistic, but I won't rule out this possibility. Someone just so desperate, I will just gamble. If, let's say, there's no safe exit for Xi, if he realizes that whether he do it or not do it, people will come back at him, his family, his empire will all be implicated, then he will have to put up a fight. And for him, his family, and his allies, then he's willing to do it. I can see that he has that kind of I don't know, that kind of I want to say gut. He's that kind of a mood, I would say. He's willing to confront the whole country to obtain his goal.
Yeah. I'm just curious, what is the procedure for changing the leader of the Communist Party in China?
Formally, the procedure is going through the Chinese Central Committee meeting. Every 5 years, the all Communist Party members will elect their delegates. The delegates will elect further representative to the National Communist Party, like a Congress. The party Congress will meet, discuss, and elect their kind of party leaders. That's a formal procedure. But informally, is that the yearly the old leaders will actually pick the successors, and because the Chinese Communist Party consists of many tiers. Top is General Party Secretary. He's also the chair of the Party Congress. And directly beneath the General Party Secretary is the Political Bureau of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau. Political Bureau is the, again, formal organization that elected by the Congress, Chinese Communist Party Congress. So this is the executive of the Congress, basically fulfill all the kind of mandate by the Congress. And supposedly the members, like a standing committee member of the Political Bureau, those are the most kind of powerful members in the party. And once they retire, they can still hold a lot of power because before they leave, they need to nominate the future leaders, right? Who will sit in the standing committee of the Political Bureau, or who will be the member of the Political Bureau. And so these members, like outgoing elites, will select, I think this comrade is pretty good. Of course, usually said this is he groomed this guy to the top kind of a position. So this person will defend his legacies. So that's why it's more like a patron-client relationship. There is informal power oftentimes shape how party succession will happen. But there will be a lot of competition as well behind the closed doors rules in Chinese Communist Party succession. But there are a lot of informal kind of power juggling behind the closed doors.
I'm curious, what usually would constitute sort of the time has come to replace somebody on the top, given that they're not directly like sort of a timeline?
In general, of course, the Communist Party was in power since 1949. For the first, I would say, 30 years, there were no rules at all. Mao basically determined, hey, I want you, and tomorrow I don't like you, right? So there are no real kind of timeline or horizon. Even before Mao died, he said, "Oh, I needed to pick a successor. I lost faith in my selected leader just last night, so I will just oust him and select another one." So there are no real timelines because this is a topic many China scholars study, this kind of so-called dictator's curse. Like a dictator always worry about power. When you select a successor, you worry this guy will actually kick you out before you actually retire. But the problem for the successor is that if I don't build my power, once this guy dies, I just don't have power to actually sustain, because every legitimacy comes from this guy. So Wang Dong took it over, so-called the second generation of leaders. He sort of say, Mao's practice is horrible. This is not creating a sustained kind of a leadership or governance. So that's why he basically introduced some kind of informal rule, saying that we will, like as elders, we will select the kind of successors, and then while we are in power, and groom this person, and then when we retire, and this person will take it over. Usually said Wang Dong, Jiang was pushed to the position. In fact, the Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang, those were the selected general party secretaries selected by Deng. So he selected these people, and then of course he also selected Jiang as a successor to his kind of successor. The generally said when Jiang was in power, he's supposed to select the other kind of successors. Generally said Jiang selected the successor was already selected by Deng. Hu Jintao was selected as a successor to Jiang. So it's Jiang's turn to actually select Hu Jintao's kind of successor. But he groomed quite a few guys, and then once Hu Jintao came to power, who actually started to actually dismiss all his kind of chosen successors. And then Hu Jintao says, I will select my successors. Right? So everyone since Deng is trying to select their successors, but not very successful. So that's why in terms of timeline, is that usually one leader is in power, they will pick their successors, basically designate that's the successor. It's anyone's guess. I think it's just shows the uncertainty inherent in this kind of regime. So that also caused a lot of trouble for the economic development.
Yeah. In terms of dictator's curse, I feel like often another part of it that I hear is that if we take an example of Taiwan, it's this almost like desperate, terrible action one would have to take to secure their own life, secure their own power, because if they lose power, they already have so many enemies, they cannot afford it. And that's why I'm curious if there is a way in China for if somebody's head of the government or very much the elite, like top military man or top man, like in the economic ministry, for them to peacefully retire and not have to look over their shoulder all the time, worrying about their lives. So I was curious kind of what usually happens to the people that leave either the absolute leadership post or one of those like very most important posts.
Yeah, that's why, of course, that would concern the Stalin and Mao, right? Basically, all his enemies had a very, very bad ending. So that's why under Deng, he tried to reorganize the party, particularly introduce this kind of culture that not a winner take all and either win or lose, that kind of a total win victory, total loss. At least since Deng, like in the 80s, even before Xi came to power in 2012, Chinese Communist Party has generally followed this kind of a norm. Once you reach certain level, particularly like a ministry level or even so-called the national level, once you enter the state council, enter the kind of political bureau, you will have a safe passage. At least you don't need to worry about your life. Right? It's like you won't be executed. Even if there are like issues, corruption, all those issues, they will settle this behind closed doors, won't disclose it. If it's a political issue, sometimes you may be arrested, but usually you don't need to worry about your life. But when Xi took over in 2012, he took a very aggressive approach. He started to massively arrest the high-ranking government officials. And at the ministry level, and even at the kind of so-called national level, like people in the state council, in the kind of political bureau, because that's his kind of way to revenge against the people who blocked his way. But even then, I would say there's political bureau, two, no, actually not more than two political bureau members were arrested. In neither cases, they were executed. And so they were mostly arrested and thrown into prison for like life sentences or 25 years.
It's near execution.
Yeah, it's very near. That's why many people still think he is getting really destroy the old norms, at least introduced by Deng. So this, going back to your kind of question, is that would this actually reignite this kind of concern, like losing political competition may end of not just your kind of economic assets, but even potentially your life, right? So that can trigger this kind of all-out war. I don't care the consequences for other people. I just want to gamble. If I win, I may actually keep my kind of economic empire and political power. Yeah, it's possible. So in that sense, I think that's why I won't rule out this potential that she will actually launch a war, punishment from his own military generals.
Well, on this not very optimistic note, I think there is a lot to think about. I hope of course, for a more peaceful world. Thank you once again for helping shed some light on what's happening in China.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I certainly don't um, like praise wars or even encourage politicians to take risks. I certainly pray for peaceful resolution here, but we just don't know. Honestly, I think we just don't know a lot about decision making at the very top level, particularly regarding the Taiwan issue. It further complicated by chaos in Taiwanese politics and the Trump administration, I think, policy also throws some uncertainty, like his comment about unification a few days earlier. And of course, later on, he immediately walked back, saying, oh, talking about political unification, talking about economic unification. But still, American strategy, so-called strategic ambiguity, for a long time has served the U.S. interests well. But I think probably U.S. will be forced to take a clear stance in the future. And that, again, will further trigger responses from China either way. So again, I think that's a topic for further discussion, for many discussions down the road. But certainly I hope that the Taiwan Strait will remain peaceful and all countries will remain restrained, and all people on both sides of the strait can benefit, live their kind of best life they can get, they deserve.
Yeah.
I would say.
Well,
Okay,
thank you.
wonderful. Thank you.